Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is an Iran war live update. Goodness me, a global geopolitics live update. It is very late here. It's 2 o'clock in the morning UK time, and I was just finishing just a late night watching a film, Warfare of all things, on Amazon Prime, which is about war. Alex Garland's interesting look at the chaos of tactical warfare, and that was a war taking place in the Middle East, the Iraq War. There is another one that appears to have started. Well, I don't know if I can say started tonight. It was started between Iran and Israel previously, but it looks like the US has joined in. And that is obviously very serious. Before we look at some of the details, I've done a few videos recently concerning what should happen there, what I think would be a beneficial state of affairs, but I've not been very sure about this. I'm really actually very close to being 50-50 about whether this is a good idea. And it seems that the US has broadly done, actually, they've done slightly more than I was advocating for. I was advocating for a precision strike on Fordo, a nuclear facility in Iran. They've actually hit 3 nuclear facilities tonight. And my thoughts have previously been that they should just do, if they're going to, the maximal thing that the US should do should be to strike and then get out. That's done. We've done our bit. We've used the bunker busters. That's what you need us for. Because for me, this isn't about Israel and Iran. This is about Iran having nuclear capabilities and capacity. And if anyone is to advocate anything happening here, it's that a theocratic dictatorship does not have nuclear capabilities, even if it's 9 months, a year, 2 years off, or 2 weeks off. As I've explained before, the time is irrelevant. It doesn't really matter how close one is. It is just a case of not wanting a dictatorship to have their hands on nuclear capabilities. But this comes with massive risks. There are environmental risks from potential nuclear fallout or nuclear pollution or whatnot into water courses, etc., etc. There is obviously a very human cost to this in terms of the people lost, but also, does this break out then into a larger war? Does this precipitate a regime change that itself is full of unknowns and dangers? And it's going to be very difficult. It's very difficult to predict whether something's good when you measure it on the consequences of what happens, and therefore your moral and political evaluation is only as good as your prediction. And if I'm very hopeful, then I predict that nuclear capabilities and capacities are eliminated, job done. And if we're super, super lucky, then there's a regime change that doesn't bring about some kind of power vacuum. And there is a nice secular democratic state that replaces the theocratic dictatorship regime that's already in place. But of course, that's an awful lot of hopium there. The reality might well be that this could go south very much. And that's why I've been very close to not advocating what the US has done. And I'm still really not sure. Yeah, there's a lot of wishful thinking going on here. Exactly. And but I'm aware of that. And you have that range. You have that range. If everything goes well, then this is a good decision. But the range goes down to, yeah, this could be terrible. And I do acknowledge that. Okay, so what do we understand has taken place? Let's have a look at some of the data. I'm just going to move myself over to here. We're going to start with the headline: New York Times, US enters war with Iran. So that's that's a good way to interpret what's happened so far. Now, Thomas Massey, interesting, a Republican, one of the 2 Republicans who crossed the aisle to vote against the big beautiful bill, says this is not constitutional. We'll talk about reactions to what Donald Trump has decided and what he has said just after we understand what has happened. So we have completed, said Donald Trump just now, we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. So interesting, bomb, bomb, bomb. Let's have peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, there are some claims that there was a bit of distraction going on with the US Air Force, whereby there were some B-2 bombers, these big stealth bombers that drop these bunker busters, these GBU-57A bombs, I think they are. There was a claim that there was some B-2 bombers going on their way to Guam, and people thinking, oh, right, no, it's not going to happen. But actually, that was a distraction while it did happen. So I think there was some tactical plane movements going on. Donald Trump has then retweeted or retruthed an open source intel source saying Fordo is gone. Now, a lot of people are saying Donald Trump has said this. I don't know that he said that, but he has retruthed it. And I don't know how accurate it is to say. There are some pictures that are floating around at the moment, but apparently those are old pictures and are not relevant to the strikes tonight. So be warned if you do see some pictures. As expected, B-2 strategic bombers were involved in the attack, says Tendar, a German source here, against Iranian nuclear facilities. And there are the positions and satellite images of the sites there, and the B-2 bomber, that's what it looks like. We have the Strait of Hormuz is going to be the focus. If the Mullah regime intends to retaliate, then this would be one of the contested areas. So the question then, well, there are several questions, of course. There are going to be many, many questions. But one is, what is the damage? Have the Americans actually taken out Fordo? Fordo's the emphasis should be on Fordo. That's like deep underground. And that's why the Americans have got involved, because no one else supposedly in the world has the ability to do that with conventional munitions. And so that's why the Americans had to get involved as Trump would see it. So Trump actually asked the right questions the other day, which is, one of them is, is it necessary? Well, it depends what your objectives are, right? And will it work? So yeah, and there was one other question, but I'm so tired now that I can't remember what it was. But actually, there were sensible questions for Trump to have asked, and I'm not one to ever really give Trump too much kudos. And he's obviously decided, or the team around him has decided, that yes to all of that, all of those questions, and it was necessary, and it was something that could lead to a successful outcome. In terms of, could they destroy the facility? But we don't know. So the first question is, what has actually happened? What's the outcome of these strikes? Second question is, what do the Iranians do in response? Is this like war on the US? Because the problem for Iran is they're a little bit on their own. Okay, there are some nations who might be somewhat supportive of them, but there are a lot of these Shia Muslims who don't particularly get on with, say, Saudi Arabia and a lot of these other Arab states. You've got Israel fairly nearby. Syria is in all sorts of trouble. Iraq is pretty chaotic. You've got Afghanistan on the other side. Turkmenistan. Who is going to go hard on the US? Maybe the Houthis. And it may be that this brings Iran to some, ideally, this brings Iran to look at peace, just like Trump has demanded in all caps, and therefore brings an end, you would hope, to their nuclear ambitions. If they decide to just wage war on the US, we already have the Ayatollah essentially in hiding in a bunker without comms. So he's apparently chosen 3 potential replacements for himself. So it looks like the Iranians are on a back foot. And of course, Israel are going to keep up the warfare, the conventional warfare on surface-to-air missile systems. They took out more F-14s today. So they have been doing the classic suppression of enemy air defense, destruction of enemy air defense, really, taking out both surface-to-air missile systems and surface-to-surface missile systems too. But in terms of air defense, surface-to-air missile systems and planes and air bases. So I presume the Israelis would just keep doing that and chipping away at Iran's ability to be able to meaningfully react to this. But again, I might be being too hopeful here. They are obviously going to still have ballistic missiles in their arsenal. Now, here we have Adam Kinzinger, who is a former Republican who's now gone skewed to more to the Democrats, but he's a veteran and he is an advocate of these strikes. So he says the US attack on the nuclear facilities is, in my opinion, the right call. We will see what the results are, but now the key is suppressing surface-to-surface missile fire. So I just mentioned that, I was talking about surface-to-air, but did mention surface-to-surface as well, and the Israelis are doing that. And then negotiate to end the fight with Iran. Good call by the president. And here's someone that absolutely excoriates Trump at every conceivable opportunity. With the stated goal of destroying Iran's nuclear program, says Kinzinger later, there is a chance for peace now. Military should be used to compel diplomatic action. Nothing is without risk, but for years Iran has targeted and killed Americans, and nuclear-armed Iran would have been unacceptable. I generally agree with this point, and it might make me controversial because there is dubious legality surrounding this in kind of technical legal terms. And I remember in previous videos, I've differentiated between morality and legality. Doing the legal thing doesn't always mean doing the right thing. But of course, it depends how you frame your moral evaluation. But there are times when the law is in place, but it doesn't bring about the best outcome. But again, you know, I'm using, for example, a moral code called consequentialism in order to make that kind of calculation. So it depends how I'm going to make that calculation. Anyway, I don't want to get into long weeds of that. But Mehdi Hassan really is talking to this. He says back to what Trump said. This is a war crime and a violation of the UN Charter and the NPT. The anti-war president, what a disgrace. And there is a point here. So Trump has campaigned on being anti-war, and he has taken the US into a war here, essentially. You know, that was his choice to do. How will his base react when this was kind of a major component of his agenda, talking about Ukraine, solving that within 24 hours, and you know, always blaming other people like Biden and Obama. They got us into these wars, it's their fault, blah, blah, blah. I will get you out of them. I won't take us to war. And then within 4 months, 5 months, he's taken the US into war against Iran. I'm not saying that his decision was bad. What I'm saying is it is definitely contradictory to his stated agenda. And I think there'll be a lot of people who will be very aggrieved by, a lot of his supporters will be very aggrieved by what he's done. Now, Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project says, watch how fast the MAGA anti-war faction bends the knee. Watch. In related news, welcome, fellow neocons. Okay, so I think this is likely to happen. You are likely to have people who were otherwise, no, this is terrible, this shouldn't happen, as a MAGA Republican, but they might look at this and go, oh, this looks quite successful. Of course, it's too early really to tell, but you'll probably get a lot of people going, oh yeah, okay, it was okay, and then like bending their knee to Trump over and above ideology, right? It's going to be very interesting to see what Marjorie Taylor Greene, Steve Bannon, and Tucker Carlson say, because they've been three of the most vehement critics recently of Trump's more bellicose rhetoric. Now, Matt Gaetz here, who's MAGA stalwart, now is a presenter on OAN, the news channel that's further to the right than Fox, says President Trump basically wants this to be like the Soleimani strike. So the Iranian general who was taken out by Trump in Trump 1.0, he wants this to be like the Soleimani strike, one and done. No regime change war. Trump the peacemaker, exclamation mark. Now, actually, it could be like that. Not concentrating on regime change, just taking out nuclear capabilities. And that's it. We're done. We're off. We might still help with refueling and intelligence data from satellites with the Israelis that they've already been doing, no doubt. This could well be just in, out. We've done what we've said we'd do, and that's all from us, folks. Um, and that could, as I say, bring about. It could expedite uh, a peace. It could mean the Iranians are like, right, we are done now. There's nothing left to threaten anyone with. There's so on and so forth, and they could sue for peace. And that would make Trump look like a peacemaker because he's like, now's the time for peace. Now I've blown up loads of stuff. Now's the time for peace. And you could get this kind of reaction. So this is a MAGA person reacting in the bend the knee to Trump kind of way, rather than going in the other direction. It's going to be interesting. You're going to have, Bernie Sanders is giving a fight oligarchy not presentation, but a public speech just now, and the news came through, and there were lots of boos in the crowd, I believe. And he, from his point of view, he's dead against it. So that there will be the whole myriad of reactions, but again, it's going to be fairly early doors still to really get a great sense of whether this is successful or not. Bernie Sanders, here it says, Bernie Sanders was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at a rally fighting oligarchy. And he read Trump's announcement to the crowd, prompting immediate boos and chants of no more war. I agree. And this, funnily enough, sounds like the right-wing populism of Trump on his campaign trail. And this is your left-wing populism of Bernie Sanders. He says it's so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the US Congress. The president does not have the right. And there is definitely a problem. So I was advocating for that to happen, which is for this to go through Congress to make sure that there is democratic backing to this decision. But Trump didn't do that. So actually, that is against what I was advocating. I have to concur with Bernie Sanders there. So there will be big fights over the constitutionality of this and whether this was the right decision, of course, going forward. Now, Lindsey Graham, who's a little bit of a war hawk, he's a firm supporter of Ukraine and wants, and you do wonder whether the success here might embolden someone like Lindsey Graham to say, look, we can look if it's successful, right? Look, we can help out. We've helped Israel out with Iran. Surely we can help Ukraine out with Russia. But of course, Trump seems to be completely compromised by Russia and the Kremlin. So I don't think that that's the likely outcome here. But anyway, Lindsey Graham has said, good, this was the right call. The regime deserves it. Well done, President Trump. To my fellow citizens, we have the best Air Force in the world. It makes me so proud. Fly, fight, win. And you're going to get a lot of this very, as I've already used the word once, bellicose kind of rhetoric and all this sort of patriotic rhetoric, actually, more accurately. You will get a lot of this kind of USA. That is common at these sorts of times. Prospect of, this is Ted Cruz, prospect of an Iranian regime acquiring nuclear weapons represents the most acute immediate threat to America and our allies. President Trump has persistently and unequivocally stated that those threats cannot be countered without dismantling the Iranian regime's enrichment capacity. And there was talk about how the Iranians, how the Israelis were warned about this before it happened, which is an interesting way of describing that, because it means that they weren't actually completely involved in the carrying out of this mission. That they weren't flying with the Americans. It seems to be the Americans saying to the Israelis, we're going to do this, move aside, bish bash bosh, and then get out, and the Israelis saying, thank you very much, and whatnot. So yes, so you're going to get sort of reactions like this. Someone in the live chat just saying, Trump finally does something right. Here it is. Oops. So Septidile says Trump finally does something right. Finally, they mostly come out at night. Mostly. Yes, and so you get someone like myself would be like, I think he has made the right decision, but so many caveats. I'm not really confident in that, and actually, I'm quite on edge about this whole as you should be, as we all should be. This is war, and this involves nuclear and ah, um, um, the Americans have been burnt in the Middle East previously, not just once, and so there is a lot to be worried about. We can all go get a bit gung ho and go hurrah, things are being blown up, but it's going to take the dust settling to for us to get a proper sense of how we measure this. Yeah. Thank you very much to Michael Vujar. Here, this is for your dedication. You have saved me from American exceptionalism. Thank you so much. I mean, the American exceptionalism that there is here actually is that they are the ones capable of using these bunker busters. No one else appears to have that capability. Now, there were questions about whether they actually were capable of getting as far down as they needed to in Fordo. And we don't know that yet. I'm not sure that we are in a position yet to be able to calculate whether those supposedly necessary bombs, meaning that the US only could get involved and do what they did, was, that the outcomes were successful. We just don't know, of course. But yes, indeed, Michael. Yes, I'm naturally anti-American due to being Canadian. Anything they do currently now, I will view negatively, and that's a problem when you start a sort of cultural trade war with your nearest neighbor. Then your nearest neighbors just get very defensive, and okay, so I'm just trying to work out if there's much more I can add to this. Thank you very much, Kevin, by the way, Kevin Forst, for the ATP Geopolitics membership there. That's very kind of you. So yeah, this is obviously breaking news, and there will be far more detailed assessments emerging. Sean Hannity from Fox News, and Fox News have been very, very. It's actually, when you talk about the fracture in the GOP, more realistically, the fracture in the MAGA section of the GOP. So the GOP being the Republican Party, you've got this fracture in MAGA where some of them are going with Trump and some of them are going with America First, isolationism, and anti-war. Fox News have sided with Trump. Fox News have been pretty damned MAGA, but when it comes to war, they seem to be far more neocon, and that has been the case for a long time, probably time immemorial as far as Fox are concerned. And people like Sean Hannity have been very. In fact, they've had even almost shared with you earlier a segment where they're almost like giddy with excitement about the prospect. This is before it happened. The prospect of the US using these bombs and having these infographics of the bombs, and it was very, I think, obvious. There's a very obvious difference between the Fox News support of Trump and where some of the MAGA are at the moment. And Fox is definitely behind Trump in his decision to go to war. Now, Sean Hannity said, I just spoke to the president. I have new information. It appears the United States just completely obliterated Iran's top secret nuclear facility with 6 huge bunker buster bombs. 2 other nuclear sites were wiped out with 30 Tomahawk missiles launched by submarines 400 miles away. So that's interesting. If we look back at, so there it is from Sean Hannity there. If we look back here, then it looks like the Fordo enrichment plant was hit by the bombers, and then the submarines took out these other facilities with Tomahawk cruise missiles. So that adds a little bit more detail to what we know already. And I don't know if... let's have a look, see if there's anything else to add. Yeah. Oh, so here we go. Okay. So Marjorie Taylor Greene here. This is the split. Where was she going to go with this? It says NTG is peed off that Trump struck Iran. MAGA is in full-blown civil war. She said, apparently, every time America's on the verge of greatness, we get involved in another foreign war. There would not be bombs falling on the people of Israel if Netanyahu had not dropped bombs on the people of Iran first. That's a fascinating position she's taking. Very anti-Netanyahu there. Israel is a nuclear-armed nation. This is not our fight. Peace is the answer. So that's a fascinating little fracture going on there. But I think in the main, certainly from base support rather than politicians, I think base support, you're going to see more MAGA people side with Trump here, especially if it is successful. If it's successful, then the peace ideology, it will be undermined if this leads to a larger peace with a capitulation of Iran. New York Times, a news anchor said on Iranian state television, "Mr. Trump, you started it and we will end it." The broadcast showed a large graphic of American bases in the Middle East with the headline, "Within the fire range of Iran." Okay, that's very strong rhetoric, but A, do they have the ability to do that? But this is the worry. If Iran start doing that, then the US will feel they'll have to retaliate against Iran, and they get drawn into a larger conflict. And that is the worry of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and probably many people watching this, right? The argument against the US doing these strikes is it draws them in to a war more formally. And then that becomes more of a problem. So I absolutely understand Marjorie Taylor Greene's position here. I understand everyone's position here. You know, the arguments on both sides are they're all valid. All the arguments that I've seen for both sides are perfectly valid. There's not like that's a wrong statement. That's a wrong position. Like you are empirically wrong in what you're saying. This just comes down to predicting the future. This is all fine if the US isn't drawn into a war, Iran capitulates, there's no nuclear capabilities left, and we're all fine and dandy. If that's our prediction, then whoop-de-doo. But if it goes the other way, then so we can't tell who's right yet. So it's very difficult to say Marjorie Taylor Greene is right or Lindsey Graham is right. They both have valid arguments at the moment, and we have to wait to see how the dust settles. I'm just on the side of this being the right decision of the United States, but I will hold my hands up and say I got it wrong because actually my prediction is very much hope, but I could so easily be wrong, and I'm fine with that. As in, like, I'm fine with accepting that I could well be wrong because I'm it's not a hill I'm going to die on this one. This honestly could go either way. And yeah, that's a problem, Karen, is why would Iran not retaliate? Well, the only reason they wouldn't is if they really were in a lot of trouble. So if Israel had which they have been degrading them pretty fundamentally. And this is why the talk by Adam Kinzinger was about taking out surface missile systems, because what you want to do is stop the Iranians being able to do anything back to the US and the US bases. So what I'm sure the Americans will be saying to the Israelis is, right, we've done that for you. You need to go and absolutely hammer every single capability that the Iranians have for targeting US entities. And then you just hope that there's enough kickback within Iran for people to, I don't know, start indicating to the regime that they're not happy with going into full war with, the world's biggest armed forces. So, yeah. Jonathan, could you tell us your thoughts about how this may affect Ukraine? As I said earlier, I just sort of hinted that the best case scenario is that Ukraine is back on the agenda if there's a quick success with Iran, and it gives the Americans this sense that, hey, we can help bring about positive outcomes with military assistance. Now, in the case of Iran, it's direct involvement, but with Ukraine, it's like, okay, yeah, we can do this, but we can provide aid to Ukraine and bring about its peace through strength. So what Iran is if this succeeds, and there are all sorts of caveats, right? But if it does succeed, then this is peace through strength, which is you end up getting to a peace by showing massive strength to Iran. Now, that's exactly what advocates for Ukraine and allies of Ukraine have been arguing. Like the best way to get to peace in Ukraine, a just peace with the right outcome, is Ukraine has the strength to be able to force Russia into capitulating or into a difficult position during negotiations. But the problem is that the White House is just fundamentally compromised the um, by the Kremlin right throughout. I mean, that breaking news update I did earlier on Le Monde, on the newspaper article in Le Monde, where it was apparent that the Americans have conspired with the Russians at the UN to create resolutions that were effectively not supportive of Ukraine, shows absolutely. I mean, just that alone shows you that the US has no interest in supporting Ukraine. So I'm doubtful this will have any positive impact because I think they are so far down the Kremlin rabbit hole. The Americans are, and I was getting not depressed earlier, but I was just thinking, I was just having a moment of like, how can you get things so morally wrong? How can you just how can so many things in the world just be getting turned on its head? Like I was thinking, the US is going to start in like bringing asbestos back in, and they're arresting people off the streets with ice cosplay people, and it's looking like it's turning into a police state, and he's rolling back environmental legislation, and he's now saying that part of the big beautiful bill means that the USPS, the US Postal Service, is going to have to uproot all of their electric chargers which they can't sell on, so it's just tax dollars down the drain. Uproot something like 7,000 electric chargers and sell off all their electric vehicles because they're so anti-electric vehicles or something. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, bosh, 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 bosh. Like, how is this all? How is this all happening? How's the morality just, in my opinion, been turned on its head? And you've got these complete idiots in the White House making these insane decisions, like right across the board. Now, I think this decision tonight might be an okay one, but it depends on the outcome. But just generally speaking, other than that, like everything sucks, and I just it's so depressing, really, that they are anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia. They are just pro-Russia. The Trump administration is pro-Russia. End of. All the data is in, and all the statements are in, and Russia know it, and they're saying stuff to align themselves with the US, and the US are saying it, and it's no day does it get better. No day do we get any information that suggests that the US is changing course on Russia and Ukraine. It's just they're going deeper and deeper into being pro Russia. Just insane. Mitch, so a long time no here, mate. Really good to have you on board. Another Canadian. I somehow knew you'd be online for this. Lots of known unknowns to grapple with. Classic reference there. With as a result of this action, yep, uncertainty is going to rule for a good while with this move. You're absolutely right, Mitch. Of course you are, and that, yeah, it might not be for a long time that we can properly evaluate this, or Iran could capitulate tomorrow publicly or something. I don't know. But if they do anything in response to this, it's probably going to involve the Strait of Hormuz. So they have an awful lot of tanker traffic passing by this very small stretch of water. Let's see here. So that stretch of water there, and the Iranians can. I mean, there are claims that they spoofed GPS the other day, and that caused the crash of tankers. Although some people have claimed that wasn't what happened. But whatever happened the other day, the Iranians have the ability to absolutely screw over the oil prices, certainly around the world. And then it just depends what the reaction would be internationally about that. Reactions from the US, do they get embroiled further, or do they then leave it up to the Israelis and just help the Israelis out behind the scene, so they don't get involved in any further strikes, but just say, look, Israel, if you want any munitions, we'll give them to you or sell them to you or whatever. We will support you in under the bonnet, really, but you're going to have to do all the striking and all the clearing up this mess type thing. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting couple of days. That's for sure. And of course, well, someone says scruffy tails. All right, scruffy tail. All right, scruffy. Iranian spiderweb incoming. Of course, the Israelis, I mean, I presume you mean one from Israel onto Iran. I don't know whether Iran had been planning anything like that to go the other way. But remember, the Israelis were claiming the other day that come Thursday and Friday, you're going to start finding out certain things have happened. We didn't really hear about that, but it could be that there are some other long-term, long in the planning um, missions and projects that the Israelis are going to bring to fruition, and they Mossad seems to have the capability to do things like that more so than the Iranians have been able to. You know, the Iranians have been relying on their proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, and of course they've been effectively decapitated, and that has really brought about I think a greater success in what Israel are doing inside Iran from a military point of view. And of course, you know, this is moving aside from whether any of this is legal and moral, etc., etc., but just from a kind of military point of view. But yeah, I could imagine that you might see another couple of Israeli funky missions like we saw with regard to their own kind of spiderweb 2.0, where they had apparently drones coming out of containers and taking out targets, and then other such things have been rumored as well. So yeah, so a couple of comments from you guys. Paul Dangerfield: Iran is not going to capitulate. No fan of the regime, but Khomeini cannot give in, as he will lose any power he has. They will respond through terrorism, and Putin can't afford to lose another ally. And this is an interesting point, is that I've used this in terms of Putin, right? I did a whole video, and in fact, I think I did an article on this sometime back called Putin's Paradox. And the paradox is that the better Ukraine do against Russia, the more likely it is Russia's going to do something bonkers, and therefore it's almost, you could say, you don't want Ukraine to do well against Russia, because it then might get to a point where it triggers Russia sending in some tactical nukes, right? It's a kind of paradox there. You want Ukraine to win, but you don't want Russia to get to a point where, because it then becomes maybe a bit existential for Putin. And this is, I've often said that the war in Ukraine is not existential for Zelensky. Like, as a human being, if Ukraine loses a war, they lose a lot of their territory. He still gets to live, and even if the whole of Ukraine fell, he could like fly off to somewhere else. If Russia lose the war, I think it's existential for Putin, because he won't be able to last politically and socially there. And I think that will be the downfall of Putin, where it wouldn't be the downfall of Zelensky in the same kind of way. So it's existential for Putin, which means he's more likely to do nuts stuff. So if his back is against the wall, he's not going to go, oh, we've lost this, I'm going to take all my tanks back home and just pretend it never happened. You know, it would be regime change in Russia, arguably. And so there's an existential element to Putin for if he was to kind of, scare quotes, lose the war in Ukraine. Now, the analogy here is that for the Ayatollah, that's the same kind of thing. So if he connects his existence to the outcome of what goes on here, then he might be he's more likely to be the sort of person who will, if his back's against the wall, fight even harder. So that kind of lends itself to Paul's reasoning here, that he won't capitulate, because he can't capitulate, because that will lead to probably his death. Yeah. Jonathan hates Trump so much he would rather have the Americans bomb Kiev than Fordo. Nazis of Kiev. Trump getting something right just grinds him. Today only hurts Russia. Well, actually, no. I've literally spent this video telling you that I agree with Trump's position here, and I've actually said he was right in his rationale. So, Jack, your comment is completely and utterly wrong. But you can make up reality if you want to, and I don't think it. Okay, I think it does hurt Russia because Iran are an ally of Russia, and Russia have put their lot in with Iran, so this will hurt Russia. Yeah, I don't think it will affect Ukraine, Russia, but it hurts Russia, and it will affect Ukraine possibly with regard to Iran's provision of weaponry to Russia going forward. That's much less likely to happen unless they completely capitulate, and then you get a lot of equipment just being ransacked and sent across the borders on the way to Russia. I don't think that's likely, but you could think of some situation where that might be the case. So, question from Karen: if Iran does not retaliate against the US, does that not show weakness of their government? It depends on their capability. Like, what capabilities will they have left after tonight and after Israel keep going at Iran? I mean, if Iran retaliate, it's going to have to be now, because the longer they leave it, the more chance the Israelis have of taking out their military capabilities, the Iranian military capabilities. So, the retaliation is obviously only as good as what they're able to do. And if they're not able to do much because they've been absolutely hammered and they've used a lot of missiles up against Israel, and now they're going to have to, I don't know how many they've got stuck underground in these different places, but the US is going to have war game this. At least you'd hope they would have done. So they would be ready for. You would hope they'd be ready, but what does ready mean? Does it mean getting involved in stopping the retaliation by doing proactive strikes on Iranian surface missile systems? Well, then that's the US getting more formally involved in the war, and that's not what you'd want. But then the US now has to think about how do they protect their own materiel and personnel in the region. So yeah, it is. I just don't know. It just depends how weak the Iranians are, or whether they still have an awful lot of stuff left in the tank in terms of military capacity and missiles and whatnot. Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath that they war gamed it. Yeah, maybe. As I was saying that, Michael, I was thinking that. So yes, that's probably enough for me. I probably need to get to bed soon. Claire, good to have you on board from Australia. How is the USA managing this with all the top generals stood down? Who is now the head of this operation? That's a really good question, and something that was actually talked about the other day. In that who is making these decisions, and is it like Pete Hegseth, who's supremely underqualified, and a lot of the top level people have been purged, these 4-star generals and admirals, and they haven't been replaced. And then you've got Tulsi Gabbard as head of the DNI, but then she's kind of in this odd position where she's out of favor because she's anti these strikes, and now she's had to come out recently and say, well, actually no, I've been misinterpreted, blah blah blah. Then it's all a bit of a cock up. So yeah, I think that it'd be interesting to see whether there's kind of chaos behind the scenes back in the DOD and in the Trump administration over this. Yeah, so I don't know. Yes. So Israel has a right to defend, but Iran can't. Are we not now measuring with two sides? No, I didn't say Iran doesn't have the right to defend itself. Not at all. No, I didn't say that. I didn't talk about the rights at all here. I was talking military strategy. They have a right to defend themselves, I guess. But I don't think rights gets very difficult. I don't want to get too philosophical here. At the end of the day, are we saying that a criminal walking down the street was, attacked for being a criminal? Like, do they have the right to defend themselves, even though they're defending themselves from a situation that comes about from them, breaking rights, if you like? So they've broken human rights. They've fomented terrorism, they funded terrorism, they're creating nuclear capabilities. And that's why we've got to this point. So, yeah, I suppose technically they have a right to defend themselves, but the reason we're here is because they've been morally bankrupt. Now, no, we can talk about, oh well, the US has got nuclear weapons. Yeah, okay, that's been done. That's gone. Now we can't like relitigate that. They have that, and we in the UK have that, and the French have that. But what we don't want is a theocratic dictatorship getting that capability. It just higher the probability of nuclear war. So, yeah, you can say I suppose you can be technical and say that Iran has the right to defend itself, but that defending itself is going to be against the US. So the US is going to be thinking, well, we don't want to do that, and so then them and Israel are going to be hitting, all sorts of military installations and whatnot. So anyway, yes, I think I've said enough about that. I don't know if there's any other comments from you guys. I'm just going to check to see if there are any latest sort of news pieces concerning this. Israel raises the alert level. That's going to be fairly expected. It was decided to shift all areas of the country from partial and limited activity to essential activity, including a prohibition on educational activities, gatherings, workplaces, except for the essential sectors. So Israel's bracing itself for a retaliation from Iran on them. Trump is picking up the phone to reporters. The president famously is not that difficult to contact compared to predecessors. So far tonight, he's spoken to both Axios and Reuters, reportedly telling the former, "We had great success tonight. Israel is much safer now." That doesn't surprise me at all. So I think he's going to be really G'd up about this, and he's going to want to narcissistically say, "Look what I've done. This is all about me. Aren't I amazing? And America's great." But of course, you're not really counting your eggs before they've hatched, type things. And as I keep saying, it's early days. So he wants to be possibly a little bit more reserved in shouting about it. So what else do we have? Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said the strikes should serve as a clear reminder to our adversaries and allies that President Trump means what he says. The president gave Iran's leader every opportunity to make a deal, but Iran refused to commit to a nuclear disarmament agreement. President Trump has been consistent and clear that a nuclear-armed Iran will not be tolerated. That posture has now been enforced with strength, precision, and clarity. Senator Jim Risch, so he's a Republican, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, says Trump took decisive action to do what only American weapons could do. This is not the start of a forever war. That is the argument. Like, is this the start of another forever war? There will not be American boots on the ground in Iran. This was a precise, limited strike, which was necessary and by all accounts was very successful. And Ted Cruz said as long as Iran was able to access and conduct activities at Fordo, they could still rush to build a nuclear arsenal. Tonight's actions have gone far in foreclosing that possibility and countering the apocalyptic threat posed by the Iranian nuclear arsenal. So there's a lot of people shouting about how it was the right thing to do and well done to Trump for making that decision and for the success of those strikes in themselves. But of course, it's to be seen still, isn't it? As to what Iran is going to do in response and whether this remains a sensible thing for the Americans to have done, whether it is indeed at all that. Hopefully I'm being fair enough to kind of both sides here because I am that close to the center. It just depends how it turns out. If the US get embroiled in a forever war, then it will be a bad decision. And anyway, that's enough from me. I'm sure you can go and find out lots about what's going on from all the mainstream media sources that be talking about this and all over the socials as well. I will show you this. It appears to be for, oh my goodness, holy crapola. That is quite some. Let's have a look. Now, you can't hear this because I haven't set it up. But there's obviously a blast wave that's coming out from that. But that video is fake, is it? Someone says, I don't know. I don't know if it is. It could well be. Fordo is gone. Let's have a look if anyone's reacted. Last year in Syria, it is fake. Oh, damn it. Bastards. This is what happens on social media. You know, everyone's sharing stuff. They're already fake, but that's a pretty amazing explosion nonetheless. Yeah, just seeing. Okay, so I keep this is one of my long goodbyes, isn't it? Thomas Keith says 6 MOPs reportedly dropped on Fordo. The GBU 57AB relies on mass, not firepower, 30,000 pounds of tungsten, delayed fuses, inertial guidance, and geological stress sequencing. But Fordo was built for this. So it's interesting. The design of Fordo has 3 different types of concrete reinforcement that all do different things. And it was thought, you know, the Iranians basically appear to be the best in the world for reinforcing bunkers. So its design assumes MOP logic, curved tunnels, offset caverns, anti-penetration strata, layered redundancy across ventilation, C2 and IR6 centrifuge chambers. A single hit collapses nothing. 2 breach a tunnel mouth. To truly destroy the core, you need tight sequencing, vector convergence, telemetry confirmation, and real-time damage layering. That didn't happen. At best, they sealed an entrance. Iran reports no core disruption, no enrichment halt, and no internal collapse. To drop 6 MOPs means either 3 B2s in simultaneous action or 2 conducting multiple flyovers deep in contested airspace without strike escort in one of the most monitored radar corridors on Earth. If Fordo was gone, you'd see craters, electromagnetic rupture, emergency airlift, seismographs lighting up, and IR flares beneath the mountain. Instead, we got a tweet from an account run out of northern Israel yelling Fordo is gone. And that's what I said earlier, like Trump just repeating that. Is not Trump necessarily actually believing that or getting it from his own intelligence sources. While hawking Gaza's most wanted trading cards, Tomahawks on Natanz and Esfahan add nothing. Cruise missiles are subsonic, non-penetrative, and designed for surface level disruption. You don't decapitate nuclear infrastructure with Block 4s. You flick switches, you scorch perimeters, you stage headlines. A 1,000-pound warhead doesn't cut into fuel halls or disrupt cascade chambers beneath 20 meters of hardening casing. This was a signal to domestic media cycles and Tel Aviv PSYOPs operators. As of now, there is no SAR confirmation, no crater clustering, no multispectral flash analysis, no underground fire signature, no BDA loop. If Fordo still spins tomorrow, Washington just pulled off the most expensive influence op in bunker busting history, only to watch Tehran climb the escalation ladder unscathed. So that is very much the other end of the spectrum of like, yep, that it's achieved. It has achieved nothing, and it will only embolden the Iranians to strike back. So yeah, it's only fair to give that end of the possibilities as well. AOC, Democrat, who's clearly going to be against this, the president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. It is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. All of that is potentially correct. I don't know about impeachment, but I assume, well, if it all was done without congressional support, but there is a pathway to be able to do that. So it just depends how it's all laid out, how all the arguments are laid out there. So Hakeem Jeffries from the Democratic side says Donald Trump promised to bring peace to the Middle East. He has failed to deliver on that promise. The risk of war is now dramatically increased, and I pray for the safety of our troops in the region who have been put in harm's way. President Trump misled the country about his intentions, failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military force, and risks American entanglement in a potentially disastrous war in the Middle East. First, the Trump administration bears the heavy burden of explaining to the American people why this military action was undertaken. Second, Congress must be fully and immediately briefed in a classified setting, of course. Third, Donald Trump shoulders complete and total responsibility for any adverse consequences that flow from this unilateral military action. That is true. If anything goes south about this is on Donald Trump's head. And actually, that's worth having a little wonder about. So this is a high-risk strategy from Trump. And that could be why he spent a couple of days thinking about it. Or it could be that that's how long it takes to get the stuff, all your ducks in a line. But this is a high risk strategy. If this goes wrong and the US gets embroiled in a forever war and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson are vindicated, then the Democrats can come together with MAGA, with some MAGA, and absolutely excoriate Trump on this. And that could lead to an even more disastrous set of midterm elections in November 2026. So this is a really high risk strategy, and he's going to be banking on it going well. But we just don't know. Like, it's all going to come down to whether those bunker busters did the job in Fordo. Really, that's what it's going to come down to. Did they do the job? And not just that, it depends how Iran reacts. But first of all, did they do the job? If they didn't do the job, then Trump has got the US embroiled in a war and not achieved his initial intentions. So I guess we are going to have to see about that. Cryptic says there were open questions about whether MOP could pull it off because we don't know for sure the exact depth and layout of Fordo. There are some saying that it was too deep in Fordo for these to be able to have the desired effect. There are others saying that actually it is a case of just really good design of the bunkers and what they're made of, these three different forms of concrete reinforcement, some with kind of rubberized bits to cushion the explosions, and there's like three different types. I forget what they are, and it could be it could just go either way. Christopher here saying, came over from Prof Gerdis's stream. He is practically giddy. I couldn't stand it anymore. I swing not quite from giddy, but I swing from this could be good to this could not be good. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm like, he might be over here. Some other people like AOC are going to be over here. I'm like right in the middle, swinging from here to here. Like, so I just don't know. So yeah, we're going to have to see whether it is successful, whether those bombs did what they were intended to do, and that is the main question to be answered in the next sort of 12 hours or so, assuming that we'll get it in that time frame. Anyway, I'll keep you up to date after I've had some sleep. I need some sleep. It is now 3:00 my time. I'm going to be in serious trouble tomorrow morning, that's for sure. And yeah, I just don't think anything more significant has come out. Just the last couple of live updates from the Guardian here. International law expert Donald Rothwell said it was virtually impossible to mount a case that the US reported strikes on Iranian nuclear sites were legal under international law. So this, if it's correct, is a, and it all comes down to Article 51. Article 51 of the UN is very vague, as in we're talking about preemptive strikes here and whether preemptive strikes are legally defensible, and they kind of are at a stretch, but it's not clear at all, and it's probably easier to say they aren't in this case anyway. Under Article 51 of the UN Charter, it states are allowed to use force to defend themselves from an armed attack. International law experts argue that the Charter does not provide a broader right to preemptive attacks, such as the strikes Israel launched on Iran on the 13th of June on the grounds of eliminating Tehran's nuclear threat. Rothwell, a professor of at the Australian National University, said given there had been no direct threat from Iran towards the US, then Trump's reported attack could not be justified. He told Guardian Australia, it's virtually impossible, I think, for the United States to mount any credible legal argument for the strikes on that basis. Rothwell said the US attacks could set a precedent for how other countries could use the self-defense argument as cover for preemptive attacks. Quote, the really concerning aspect of this is the precedent it sets. If the US can do this, and that is a precedent that the United States is taking in terms of its interpretation of self-defense, or the way that in which you can use force. Then other states will take that into account in terms of how they consider their own future conduct. I talked about this the other day in one of my videos. This is was discussed by Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. Rory Stewart was talking about exactly this, that you open a Pandora's box here, and what you do is you communicate to countries like China that you can do preemptive strikes. Look, there's a legal precedent, even though it's legally dubious. But if the US make the argument, then that gives the argument to other people as well, and then you get a state of play around the world where war is the go-to. We've got Benjamin Netanyahu saying, "Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history." Wow. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things, but in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot in history that can help the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel, thank you. The forces of civilization, thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith. Thanks for watching. Okay. Wow. So what I will have to say is that if the bomb didn't work out, or the bombs didn't work out how they were intended, then all of this is quite embarrassing, which at the moment leads one to think they might have intelligence that they have somewhat worked. If both leaders, the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States, are being so forthright and so confident that they've done amazing things, it's not like bluster and perception can change reality. Like, either these will have worked or they won't. That's a really high risk thing to do if you don't yet know. If you don't yet know whether these have been successful strikes, then coming out and shouting about them like this so early is dangerous, probably ill-advised. But then again, the fact that they are shouting about these strikes now leads one to think maybe they've got information that they were at least somewhat successful. So Donald Trump is now addressing the nation. He's confirming the strikes on the 3 nuclear facilities. Quote, "Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horrible destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment facility. The strikes were a spectacular military success," he says, saying the key enrichment facilities have been, quote, "totally and completely obliterated." I mean, either that's true or it's false, obviously. And if it's true, then we're back to, that was a success, at least right now, militarily, a success. But if your man on Twitter talking about how it wouldn't be able to do that is correct, then that's embarrassing for Trump. But I just think if the Americans haven't obliterated Fordo, then Trump is putting his credibility on the line. Now, it's already on the line for many of us. Like, a lot of us don't believe a single word he says, but for his kind of MAGA anti-war people, he doesn't want to be caught like lying to them outright. Because I think, so it could well be a case of mission accomplished, as David here says. But again, let's wait to see the BDA, the battle damage assessment, and the satellite images, and get a sense of what has happened in Fordo in particular. When is it not embarrassing for Trump? Mission accomplished, says Bush. Trump, so I guess we'll have to we'll have to wait and see. I could go live to the speech, but I'll let him say his stuff. You guys can go and find that out elsewhere, and I will say a good night to you all. And if the nuclear facilities have been obliterated, then and there are no immediate ramifications to that in terms of like nuclear pollution and fallout type stuff, then I would say, so far so good. But whoa, is it early doors? And that is, I don't really want to say so far so good because there are too many unknowns, too many known unknowns, and unknown known unknowns, and known unknown. Yeah, you get the point. Take care, everybody, and I will hopefully bring you up to date tomorrow once I've had some beauty sleep, which, let's face it, I really need. Toodle pips. Oh, and thanks very much to Michael Vuchar, Mitch Mazerol, and Kevin Forst. Legends, all of you. Toodle pips.